Good morning. Good morning and welcome. Thank you for coming. We will have a hearing today. However, there are a series of votes on the House floor, and we will be starting no earlier than 10:30, and it's more likely to be closer to 10:45 to 11. But please check back at 10:30, and we will update you on the situation. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. I apologize profusely for being so late, but they called votes beginning at 9:45, and there were a series that just ended. So I'm here. I'm out of breath, but I am very grateful to everybody for being here. I want to again thank everybody for being here this morning at the end of a very hectic week here in Congress. I would like to thank the staff of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, in particular Mike McVicker, for coordinating this hearing, and I especially want to thank our witnesses for attending. A little over a decade ago, under the leadership of Executive Committee member Congresswoman Donna Edwards, the Commission held a hearing on human rights in Bahrain. That hearing looked at labor rights, the situation of migrant workers, and human trafficking. It noted the many efforts by the government of Bahrain to address these human rights challenges and the many challenges that remain. Today's hearing will again review the status of human rights in Bahrain, but this time with an emphasis on what has occurred during the last 3 months. In a relatively short time span, there have been serious allegations of grave human rights abuses, including extrajudicial killings, torture, arbitrary arrest, and detention, attacks on medical personnel to prevent them from treating wounded individuals, detention and abuse of female teachers and schoolgirls, lack of due process in criminal proceedings, destruction of religious sites, dismissal from jobs based on religious affiliation, and other forms of harassment directed by the Bahraini government against political opponents, many of whom are from the Shi'a majority. These allegations need to be explored, and the Commission will attempt to begin that process today. Although human rights can have a political dimension, the Commission does not take a pro-government or anti-government stance on broader political issues in Bahrain. Bahrain's political future is a matter for the people of Bahrain to determine. As a Human Rights Commission, we are pro-human rights, regardless of politics, religion, race, or ethnicity. That will be our focus today and always. The United States and Bahrain have an important friendship that serves the needs and interests of both countries. Also, during the last decade, Bahrain has shown a willingness to address human rights issues in a constructive manner. It is important to recognize and appreciate those facts. However, there are times when one friend needs to tell another that something is wrong, and this is one of those times. As the Wall Street Journal noted earlier this week, Bahrain is indeed a friend, but it does not deserve a pass on human rights issues. I think it might be helpful and serve to strengthen the Bahraini government's international relations to allow the International Committee for the Red Cross or the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights or an appropriate UN Human Rights Special Rapporteur to travel to Bahrain, visit detainees, and provide an objective assessment of their physical security and the judicial process that will determine their future. Every nation faces human rights challenges, including my own, and it's important for members of Congress to learn about them, not just to criticize, but to help governments, NGOs, and international organizations work together to find legal, peaceful solutions to long-standing abuses and restrictions on human rights. I'd like to end my remarks by noting a couple of things. First, about my own government. I was expecting at least one, possibly two, witnesses from the State Department to testify. Regrettably, over the past 72 hours, we were informed that no one in any of the bureaus is available today. I regret that the State Department is unable to appear. Second, I'd like to thank the staff of the Commission and the staff at my personal office for talking to the many individuals who called from Bahrain to express their views about the complex situation in Bahrain. The callers were respectful, calm and very clear about their concerns. The same is true with the many emails my office has received that express a wide diversity of views within Bahrain on human rights and what has been taking place there since February. I can't express how much I appreciate these individuals taking time to contact my staff. The Commission, I also want to add that the Commission does not call representatives of foreign governments to testify at our hearings. This is not specific to Bahrain, but from China to Colombia, from Iran to Vietnam, from Sri Lanka to Morocco, our position has been the same. Governments have significant access and resources to present their point of view to the media and to U.S. and international officials. Like Bahrain, they are often aided by one or more public relations firms. The Commission, as an entity dedicated to human rights, is often a forum where the voices of the voiceless are provided an opportunity to be heard. Having said that, we invited the government of Bahrain to enter a statement into the record of this hearing, and I'd like to officially submit the statement for the record. Copies are also available at the literature table. I'm also submitting for the record a May 11th press release from Amnesty International regarding the trials of opposition leaders in Bahrain, a May 12th release by Human Rights First on torture and trials of protesters in Bahrain, the April 21st report of the AFL-CIO regarding the government of Bahrain's failure to comply with agreements under the U.S.-Bahrain Free Trade Agreement, and an April report by Doctors Without Borders on violations against the medical community. I very much look forward to hearing from today's witnesses, from two NGOs, one of which has investigated the general human rights allegations, and the other which has examined the particularly troubling targeting of medical personnel. Moreover, I'm particularly pleased to hear from a member of the Bahrain Center for Human Rights, whose father is currently detained in Bahrain under circumstances which indicate torture and other abuses. I would like to recognize, again, acknowledge that all of you, and thank you for being here, and we will now begin. So let me get my list here of I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Joe Storm, Deputy Director of Middle East and North Africa Division of Human Rights Watch, Mariam Al-Kawaja, Bahrain Center for Human Rights, and Richard Solomon, Deputy Director at Physicians for Human Rights. And Mr. Stork, why don't we begin with you, and again, thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much, Congressman McGovern, and thanks for convening this meeting. I'm pleased to be here, and I've submitted a written testimony, which I'd request be put in the record, so that I might be try and be brief this morning. This is a very critical time to be having these hearings, as you noted. What we've seen over the last 5 or 6 weeks since the middle of March is a very strong counter-narrative emerging from the government of Bahrain, which has basically transformed the accounts of pro-democracy, largely peaceful pro-democracy protests in Bahrain into what the government refers to and has charged individuals like Mariam's father with a terrorist campaign to overthrow the government, so that democracy essentially becomes equated with terrorism. This is an extremely grave state of affairs, and I think underlies a lot of the problems, some of which I'll allude to today. I think it's very important to note that since the middle of March, when this period of repression that we're talking about has come at a time when the government has been fully in control of the security situation. So this is not like Libya, where you have an armed insurgency. This is not Syria, where thousands of people are on the streets every week, if not every day. This is a place where the government very quickly and very comprehensively suppressed all manner of protest. And so what's been going on today, when you have night after night masked armed men, some in uniform, some in plain clothes, breaking into homes, hauling Bahrainis off to unknown locations, to interrogation centers where torture and ill treatment are routine, a time when people are pulled out of cars at checkpoints and beaten or arrested, a time when people are suffering from gunshot or other wounds inflicted by security forces, fear going to hospitals and medical centers where other security forces will beat and arrest them. These are times when something forceful and specific is needed from the United States government. I've been watching the situation in Bahrain very closely since 1996, which was the time of my first visit on behalf of Human Rights Watch. At that time, Bahrain was in the midst of another period of protracted and serious unrest, one that Bahrainis themselves referred to as an intifada, an uprising. And I documented very serious abuses that occurred in that period. We took great heart, and I personally took great heart, in the changes that King Hamad introduced after he came to the throne in 1999. He abolished the state security courts, freed political prisoners, invited those who had been forced into exile to return, and most of them did. Abdulhadi Khawaja was one of them. I want to point out that my colleagues, and briefly for a time myself, were on the ground in Bahrain over these last 2 months, from February 17th until April 20th, the date being when the authorities refused to renew a colleague's visa. I want to outline a couple of areas where we gathered information, did investigations, and just in a very summary fashion present them to you this morning. The first thing I want to refer to is the deaths, which in many cases seem to have been unlawful killings by security forces. We documented the use of live ammunition against largely peaceful protesters, as well as, and I want to stress this, the misuse of riot control equipment, such as rubber bullets and birdshot pellets and tear gas. In other words, use of these weapons in a manner that was completely inappropriate, and where these two became lethal weapons. We investigated one appalling case of a young 32-year-old Hani Juma, who on March 19th in Khamis village was chased into an empty apartment building under construction by security forces, and when neighbors found him about an hour later, he was unconscious. We don't think he ever regained consciousness. He eventually died several days later as a result of having been shot at point-blank range with pellet guns in his knees, in his elbow, and he was beaten so that his teeth as well as bone fragments were on the floor. As far as we know, there has been absolutely no acknowledgement of this on the part of the authorities, and certainly no investigation into the circumstances of Hani Juma's death. The other area I want to quickly touch on is arbitrary arrests and detention. As you know, about 1,000 people have been arrested in this period since the middle of March. We believe that about 630 of these people still remain in detention. What is most disturbing is the fact that we don't know where these people are, and neither do lawyers or family members. They have been held incommunicado. They've been allowed at most brief, and by brief I mean something like 30 seconds to a minute, phone calls once or twice with families to say basically, I'm all right. Thanks for asking. Their lawyers have not been able to see them except in the few cases when they've actually been brought into the courtroom. And it's in the courtroom where they're able to meet with the lawyers for a few minutes. These people under arrest include leaders of legally recognized political opposition societies like Ibrahim Sharif, a Sunni Muslim who heads the secularist National Democratic Action Society, Matar Ibrahim Matar and Jawad Fayrouz, recently elected members of parliament representing the Wifaq Society, the largest opposition bloc in the parliament. The use of incommunicado detention raises very serious concerns about torture or ill treatment. This is when it occurs, when people are held without any kind of access. I'm very glad to hear you call for ICRC access to the prisons for precisely this reason. I'm going to let my colleague, Rich Solom, speak to the issue of attacks against medical personnel and the whole assault on the medical establishment. I just want to note very quickly that my colleagues who were on the ground from mid-February through mid-April were able, prior to March 16th, to have frequent and generally unrestricted access to Salmania Medical Complex as well as other health centers, and on several occasions after March 16th as well. And the government allegations that have surfaced since March 16th that doctors refused to treat Sunni patients or brought in weapons or used the hospital's blood supply to simulate grievous protester injuries, these things that surfaced after the military takeover of the hospital, to our mind, based on what we know from being on the ground, appear to be completely fictive. We wrote to the Minister of Health on April 21 requesting information about these and other allegations, and we've yet to have any response. Very quickly, just to mention, there have been numerous restrictions also on the right to freedom of information, including banning websites and publications and the hostile takeover of El Wasat, the country's one independent newspaper. Just this week, the Frederick Richter, the correspondent for Reuters, who's been there since 2008, and the only international journalist based in Bahrain, was told to pack his bags and get out within the week. Human Rights Watch itself, I mentioned my colleague had not had his visa renewed. We sent another colleague last week to observe the trials. He was turned back at the airport. I received a letter myself, or my bosses received a letter yesterday from the Minister of Social Development saying that you can send anybody to Bahrain, but don't send Joe Stork because we're not going to let him in. I urge people to bear this in mind when they read the submitted testimony of the representative of the government of Bahrain. Another thing that we've looked at is the summary workplace dismissals. So I was also very glad to hear you mention the AFL-CIO petition to suspend the free trade agreement because it appears that most of these dismissals took place in violation of Bahraini labor laws as well as international standards. Let me end with a couple of recommendations. First of all, we strongly urge the Congress and the administration to speak out vigorously and publicly about these abuses. The United States should not be seen as complicit in a campaign by an autocratic government to stifle popular demands for democratic rights, a dynamic that has especially dangerous sectarian dimensions in Bahrain. To that end, we believe the U.S. should announce a comprehensive ban on security assistance to Bahrain, including the commercial sale of riot control as well as military hardware, until authorities take measurable steps to halt the violent suppression of peaceful protesters and hold accountable those responsible for the unlawful use of force, the use of torture and ill treatment, and arbitrary arrests and detention. It's crucial, we think, that U.S. military officials stress to their Bahraini counterparts, including Field Marshal Khalifa bin Ahmed al Khalifa, the head of the current martial law government, that continued close relations, military relations, including the presence of the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, require a prompt and comprehensive halt in serious human rights violations. We further urged Congress and the Obama administration to criticize these abuses by name, such as unlawful killing and torture, and wholesale impunity for serious crimes. Administration officials have told us they don't do so because they don't think it will be any more effective than the private démarches they've been making. We cannot guarantee that public diplomacy will have the desired effect, but the time for relying only on quiet diplomacy is past. What's at stake is not only the situation in Bahrain, but U.S. credibility regarding human rights issues throughout the region. As long as the U.S. speaks forcefully regarding violations in Iran, Syria, and Libya, as it should, but is publicly silent when it comes to Bahrain, it undermines its efforts and credibility to promote human rights in all countries, whether allies and adversaries. And in that connection, my last recommendation is to urge the Obama administration to take the lead in calling for a UN Human Rights Council session that would address the issues in Bahrain. The efforts of the Obama administration to transform and rehabilitate the whole role of the Human Rights Council is badly undermined by its silence when it comes to Bahrain. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I would like to begin by thanking the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission for creating this opportunity for people to come here and testify about the situation in Bahrain. I wanted to start by giving a very brief talk about what it was I witnessed when I was in Bahrain during the beginning of the protests, and then I was also going to speak about several other human rights violations that have occurred since I left Bahrain. I went back to Bahrain around the 10th of February, and I was there to document and report on human rights violations in my capacity as head of Foreign Relations Office at the Bahrain Center for Human Rights. On the 14th of February, the protest started. What we witnessed, unfortunately, was the use of I was also present during the attack on the Pearl roundabout or square on the 17th of February when the Bahraini security forces attempted to basically make people leave the area. But unfortunately, what I witnessed was not a clearing of an area, but rather an attack on civilians. The people who were killed that early morning were actually not killed due to random shootings that would happen and accidents, but rather it was intentional point-blank shots that killed these people. And one of them died from bird shotgun bullets or pellets, and another one died because he had excessive bleeding because his legs were cut. And then there was another person who had half his skull missing because he was shot also at point blank range with a, I believe it was a tear gas canister or a rubber bullet canister. And so far what we know is that we have around 30 people who have been killed. Some of them are expats. One of them was caught in the crossfire. Another one was shot by security forces when, according to testimonies, he attempted to help some of the protesters get away from the security forces. We also know that 4 people have died inside detention centers since the arrests began. According to the government of Bahrain, the protests were mainly Shia, but we've also seen that there has been a targeting of Sunni people in these arrests and crackdown. Namely, the first person to be arrested was Mohammed al-Bouflasa, and also Ibrahim Sharif, of course. A total of 1,176 have been arrested altogether. Some of them have been released since, including more than 100 women. Around 950, according to our count, are still in detention. Most of those are arrested include professionals such as doctors, lawyers, and 2 former members of parliament. According also to our numbers, around 25% of the detainees are below 18 years old. Most detainees, as my colleague here has mentioned, have limited access to lawyers and family. And we've also heard several accounts in which female students 11 to 16 years old were arrested from schools. We also have the reported disappearances in that the police deny having them, and according to our count, there's 54 people who have disappeared. As for the torture, I'll speak about a case that I personally know very well because my family is involved. My family was able to speak to my father and see him approximately a month after he was arrested. He had 4 fractures in his face, 3 in his cheek and 1 in his jaw, and he looked very bad. The whole left side of his face was swollen, and this was due to the beatings he had received from the security forces. He also explicitly told my family that he was being tortured in detention. And during the hearing, at the end, when the judge was concluding, my father actually spoke and asked the judge for a guarantee that the continuous torture inside the detention centers would stop. Unfortunately, no guarantee like that was made. We have reason to believe that many of those who are being held in incommunicado detention are being subjected to torture, and this, of course, raises high concern for their well-being and for their lives. During the attacks or the raids, the nightly raids that happen in which people are arrested, we've also seen cases in which the wives of those arrested would be sexually harassed. In one of those cases, actually, of my uncle, Salah al-Khawaja, his wife was sexually harassed by the security forces who attacked the house. The University of Bahrain has announced the dismissal of 1 dean, 7 academics, 25 administrative staff, and they've withdrawn 6 PhD scholarships. Over 400 students have been expelled from the University of Bahrain, and we've also seen the withdrawal of several scholarships of students abroad. Ayat al-Qarmazi, who's a 20-year-old poet, was arrested on 30th of March. She was subjected to harassment before that, and we still don't know where she is. We don't know where her place of detention is. Of course, then there's the targeting of human rights activists. I have several colleagues who are in prison today. One of them is Mohammed Sultan. Other colleagues from the center are actually in hiding as the security forces have been looking for them. The president of our center, Nabil Rajab, has been banned from travel, although the authorities would keep telling him that there is no such ban. Every time he would try to leave, he would be forbidden from leaving the country. He was also arrested for about 2 to 3 hours, in which he was beaten and threatened with rape, but then they released him. And of course, we have several other human rights activists who are in detention today, one of them being my father. I will also leave the details about the seizure of the hospitals and the attack on medical professionals to my colleague, Richard. We also have there's the issue of the mass dismissal of workers. Since the attack in mid-March, we've seen the dismissal of approximately 1,300 people in Bahrain. And this was, the reason that was given for this was that they had participated in illegal protests. We're also seeing this widespread crackdown of religious discrimination. We have around 52 demolished Shia mosques and 17 matams, which are mourning homes for the Shia sect. Also, religious gatherings and marches have been attacked by riot police. Unfortunately, the situation today that we're seeing, we've already witnessed massive human rights violations in this crackdown, but it's also a daily campaign of attacking people and individuals, and most people in Bahrain today do not feel safe, even inside their own homes. So there are several recommendations, and I would probably echo some of the recommendations that my colleague Joe Stork made. But again, I think it is very important that the United States uses the leverage that they have with Bahrain. Bahrain has made it very clear that the U.S. is a major ally to them and a very close ally. And I think this in itself shows that the U.S. does have leverage when it comes to Bahrain. So I think it's very important that the U.S. does use that leverage in making very